Hey guys, Dr. Kyle Loveless here. Today we're going to talk about something really cool. It's not necessarily a symptom or a disease. It's ultimately the big picture, or I would say underlying philosophy, the overlying viewpoint of science and everything, or medicine, or healthcare that we are in right now. And the way we do healthcare is based on certain theories, is based on certain observations and philosophies. And to be really honest with you, that's why I think we're so sick, and I think that's why our healthcare system is such a failure right now in terms of healthcare. I'm not talking about emergency care, but in terms of healthcare, it's a huge failure. We're the sickest country in the industrialized world, and really just as in the world as a whole, following that medical model is making us sick. It's a merry-go-round of just chasing symptoms, covering it up with medications. I don't think anybody can deny that. Even if you're in that system, you believe in it wholly, you still have to look at statistics and realize that it's just not a good idea. We have more doctors, more hospitals, and more technology than any other country in the world, and than we've ever had before, but yet we're the sickest country in the industrialized world. We're 5% of the world's population, and we take 75% of the world's medications. So guys, if that was the answer to your health, where do you think we'd rank? We'd be the healthiest country in the stinking world, but we're not. We're the sickest, so we have to have a little shift in our thinking, and that's just the whole point of this show, is to shift your thinking so that you can now start to shift your health, right? Hey guys, for those of you who haven't met me or watched me speak before, just to kind of reintroduce, again, I'm Dr. Kyle Loveless. My wife and I have 2 clinics in the Charlotte area called Queen City Health Center, and our whole point and mission is to change the way people view and manage their health so that you can become your own health expert and actually getting to the root cause of your health condition instead of just covering it up with medications, covering up symptoms, okay? So let's dive into this today. Excuse me, had something in my throat. Let's dive into this today. It's gonna be ultimately the germ theory, which is kind of the basis of medicine right now, and versus the terrain or the cellular theory, okay? And then after that, I'm gonna talk to you about genetics and the genetic theory versus epigenetics, which is really the science of genes right now. So I'm gonna talk to you guys about that, because if you can understand all these different theories, and you can understand or really make a good decision on which one you wanna base your healthcare on, then your healthcare decisions on who you go to for health, not for emergencies, right? I'll talk to you why medicine is an essential emergency care system, and it actually falls into these theories very, very well, but not healthcare at all. Okay, so let's start out with some history. Okay, so we have the germ theory here, and so germ theory is Louis Pasteur. So Louis Pasteur, really germs were being studied, and this idea was coming about since the 1400s, right? It's been coming around forever. However, Louis Pasteur was really considered the father of the germ theory. He's the one that came up with the idea that germs cause disease, right? And he did that through experiments and studies and things like that. And so the basis of the germ theory is that ultimately the germ, right? Also, I'll write germ theory here. So the germ equals the disease. That's what's going to cause people's health issues, right? That outside germ, whether it's a bacteria, a virus, some sort of microorganism is what a germ is considered, a fungus, whatever that is going to get into our bodies, and then it's going to get into our cells, and it's going to take it over. Now, the base of that idea is that no matter if you're healthy or if you're not, that germ is scary, and it will cause disease to you if it gets in your body. Okay, now that's really why we're wearing masks. That's why we're so concerned about this virus right now, is based on that theory that a virus is dangerous and it can hurt us. Okay, however, the terrain theory or the cellular theory was created by a guy with the last name of, and I'm going to say it's wrong, Bechamp or something like that. But ultimately, what he said is that you don't treat the microorganism. The idea over here is that we need a defense system against the microorganism. The idea over here is that God gave us an amazing defense system. We need to strengthen our own defense system, and we need to treat the patient or work with the patient's body to restore health rather than treating a microorganism. Okay, now I'm going to give you just kind of an understanding of microorganisms. Let's just talk about viruses. Viruses are some of the most abundant microorganisms on the planet. They've shown that they found at least 300 different viruses just on 300,000 just on mammals, right? So there's that many just on mammals. I said this in a video I did a while ago, but viruses, they found that if you stretch them out, if you stretch all the types of viruses out in a line, it would be 100 million light years away. So guys, I want just that concept right there to sink in for a second. There's more viruses on this planet than there are stars in the universe. There's more microorganisms or bacteria on you than there are human cells. If microorganisms were the cause of disease and what was killing us and what we had to be scared of, we wouldn't exist anymore. So there's just that simple concept right there. So understanding that is number one. So I understand, hey, you wear a mask, you don't want a virus to come in. But the truth is that's not stopping a virus to come in, number one. And number two, the virus isn't the problem. Let's talk about the theories here. So Louis Pasteur said germ causes disease. Robert Koch came on and he kind of came on that scene as well and did the same thing. And that's where the medicine is based in, that you need antibiotics to kill those bacteria. You need a vaccine to somehow strengthen your immune response. It doesn't necessarily work that way, but that's what they're basing their ideas on, is that it's going to strengthen, or not strengthen your immune response. It's going to create a defense system, a synthetic defense system against viruses and bacteria in your body. And then that you need antibiotic soaps, that you are constantly be cleaning your hands, you need to be cleaning everything around you. Do not let those viruses and bacteria in. So that's kind of the idea over here. And I drew this fishbowl here with kind of like a murky water, right? So the idea in the germ theory is that if somebody's sick, right? Or if an environment's sick, think about this. Think about like you're in a river and you're fishing, right? When you catch a fish, let's say it has 4 eyes, right? You're fishing next to a chemical plant or something, or maybe Duke Energy or whatever. So you're fishing, right? You catch this fish with 4 eyes. Do you think to yourself, okay, can you give me some water? I got like something in my throat here. Do you think to yourself, there must be something wrong with that fish? Or do you think to yourself, what the heck is in this water? Both, but your first thought is, oh my gosh, what the heck is in this water? Because it's a mutant, and we get that. So that's the idea over here. Well, the germ theory says that we need to take care and inject that fish with some sort of thing that can kill it and start to treat the fish's body, instead of saying, hey, let's clean out the fish tank and put the fish in a clean environment. Does that make sense? So let's clean the river instead of trying to clean all the fish and trying to treat all the fish with antibiotics. So that works in the idea, and even the environmental folks do that. So that works in the idea of a river, but why don't we think that way in our bodies? When we're sick, why don't we think about cleaning out our environment? So why don't we clean out the river instead of just injecting the fish with some sort of a chemical to try to get rid of their 4 eyes? Does that make sense? And so it's that idea from the beginning that's important. Hey, Louis Pasteur, actually, before he died, he said, quit treating the microorganisms, not in these exact words, I'll maybe post his quote, but he said, quit treating the microorganisms and start looking at the terrain, start looking at the patient. You have to treat the terrain. What he found is that it wasn't necessarily the germs that were causing disease, but the environment with which they were in. And so the terrain theory will sit here and say, that a microorganism will actually adapt to his environment. And just like in nature, when something's decaying, microorganisms take it over. That's the same thing with our bodies. We are nature, we're part of nature. When you're decaying and your body's breaking down, your cells are breaking down, microorganisms actually start taking that over. But when it's healthy, those microorganisms actually are an essential part of many of the functions in our body, a very important part of our health, right? And that's what we talk about, probiotics, right? That's bacteria. I said that we're mostly bacteria than we are cells. So taking something like an antibiotic is killing part of what keeps you healthy. So healthy cells and a good strong body is actually going to not need to worry, or somebody with a good strong body, it doesn't need to worry about bacteria and viruses. That's why they show that kids that play in the mud all the time, eat dirt, do all that kind of stuff, they don't get sick all the time. They're actually healthier because they're building up their microbiome in actually beneficial ways. So this theory really has been proven wrong, guys. The science completely goes away from the germ theory, but it's the basis of medicine. So if they took this theory out, they would have to take out almost everything that they do. Does that make sense? Now, am I saying antibiotics aren't a good part of healthcare and we shouldn't have them? That's not what I said. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't be using them all the time on everything. They should be there in an emergency situation when someone with a weak body that was already decaying is being overtaken by a bacterial infection. And now we can go in and try to help the body out with an antibiotic by killing that bacterial infection. However, when people get sick right now, they have maybe a bacterial or viral infection. We want to go take out the virus instead of letting the body do its job, which the majority of the time it will do because we have innate defense systems. Part of you being strong against viruses and bacteria is your innate response to them. right? The acidity of your skin will decide how well you keep viruses and bacteria off. The acidity of your mouth or the acidity of your stomach will decide how well you kill viruses, bacteria, fungus, things like that you eat. Does that make sense? So certain acidity levels is very important. The actual, your body having what it needs and your microbiome being strong will help your body take care of funguses like Candida albicans so it doesn't get overgrown and things like that. So it's really our environment. So instead of us worrying about germs, right, the very last thing we need to be worried about is a germ. The first thing we need to be worried about is strengthening or changing the environment that germ's in so that it's not an environment for it to take over the body. Does that make sense? It's just like a tree. We've seen trees that are kind of like breaking down. All the microorganisms flood to it and it breaks that tree apart. But if that tree's healthy, they just live in a symbiotic relationship together and they're not trying to break it down. That's the same thing with our bodies. We actually have certain types of strep on us that keep us from the strep that we don't want on us into our system. So the whole body works as a whole like that, okay? So the best thing you can do is drop this theory. Medicine, okay, so I'm just gonna write this so we kind of understand what I'm saying. This is the basis of medicine. One of the bases, I'll talk about another one when I talk about the genetic theory, but we got medicine over here. This is your natural health care, your chiropractic care, right? This is your naturopaths. This is your holistic doctors. Everything they do is based on the idea that the terrain is what we have to look at, not the germs, right? Now, can microorganisms take over a weak terrain? Absolutely. But are they the cause of the problem? Or are they just there as a part of nature, doing what they do and being part of the cycle of nature, breaking things that are already decaying down? Does that make sense to you guys? I hope that does. Hey, if you like that idea between the germ theory and realizing that that's the basis of all medicine, antibiotic use is the basis of that, that vaccines are based on that, everything is really based on this. And this is the problem because we've decided that the body is weak and it doesn't take care of itself, so we need to give it medications from the day it's born. Vaccine is a medication that's given to you the day you're born. Right? So we're saying the body's weak, we need to medicate it. Well, guess what that's done? That's made our body weaker because they're chemicals and we're getting sicker and sicker. We're toxifying the body from day one and making it more of an optimal environment for these germs to actually reproduce because we're killing our microbiome. We're causing chemicals in the body which will detoxify the system and make organ systems not work as well. We're doing all that from the very beginning because of this system. And I'm not just trying to kill medicine here, but I want to beat it up enough so that you realize that that's not the answer to your health. It's a great emergency care system. If we have a car accident, you chop your arm up, you go there and they have these emergency care things they do, but those things don't make you healthy. Those things keep you alive. Right? So you're sick after you have a heart attack, right? You have a heart attack, they save your life. You're still extremely unhealthy, but just thank God we have technology that's taught doctors how to keep you alive. But the very next day, you need to start moving towards what's wrong with my environment? What's wrong with my terrain? And that environment idea is what's going to lead me into this next step of talking today, which is the genetic theory. So give me a second to just kind of wipe this down. So epigenetics versus genetics. Okay, so your genetic theory over here. So we have genetic theory versus epigenetics. Cool. Hopefully I'm still in the video here. Good. So your genetic theory, cool. Genetic theory is going to be that the body was more ultimately based on whatever you were given from your parents. Okay. So your DNA is going to decide everything, right? It's like kind of like the driving force of your health. If you have bad DNA, you're done. You don't have a choice. And this is the idea that if your mom had heart disease, you're going to get heart disease. If your dad had cancer, you're going to get cancer, right? And that's the whole idea of cutting off, breasts, cutting off the mammillary glands because their mom or they were shown that they had a genetic factor that can play a role in their susceptibility to getting breast cancer. But the truth is, which we're going to talk about, that epigenetics is that the environment decides that. And that person with that gene, there's some things that makes them more susceptible, but if their environment is good and their body is strong, there's no reason whatsoever they're going to get cancer because cancer is actually an adaptation. It's not a disease. It's an adaptation to your environment for your cells to survive. Cancer is a mutation of your DNA in your body. It mutates to survive. If it didn't, all the cells would die off because it's in such a bad environment. And that could be from eating tons of sugar. That could be from being very acidic. That could be from not getting enough oxygen over the years. And the cells are just trying to adapt, and they create cancer cells, and those proliferate, right? So epigenetics versus genetics. Genetics says that you are a victim of your genes. Epigenetics says you're a victim in your environment, okay? So we got the environment over here, and your environment is pretty much everything around you, okay? So this is victim of genes, ultimately your environment. And that's a good thing because this one has zero hope and doesn't even make sense in terms of, I believe that our body is wonderfully and powerfully made, but if you got bad genes, then you're screwed. That doesn't make sense. Our body is wonderfully and powerfully made, and unless we really mess up the environment around it, it can handle a lot. Would you guys agree that we're pretty amazing at adapting to our environment? I mean, look at the world we live in today with all the chemicals, with all the high stress, with all the constant input, the medications that we're on, all these things, the foods that we eat. If you look at some of the chemicals in the food, it blows my mind that we could even be alive anymore. I know for me, I used to drink 3 Dr. Peppers a day-ish, and sometimes more. And then I'd go play basketball all day, and instead of drinking water, I would just drink Dr. Pepper as my drink. And then I'd eat, sugar and chemicals and all kinds of junk. I don't even know how we survived through that, but that's how powerful our body is, okay? So genetics ultimately say that you're a victim of genes. This is a victim environment. So let's talk about epigenetics here. In science, and if you can flash back to like biology class, we were taught that our cell, okay, so we got the cell wall here, or we got our cell here. And what is, if you can just think about, what is the brain of the cell? It's in every biology book. The brain of the cell is the what? Kaylin, you know it?
Nucleus.
It's the nucleus, right? We all were taught this. If you paid attention at all, even if you didn't, you probably heard that the nucleus is the brain of the cell, right? So you got your nucleus here, and what's inside the nucleus? Your DNA. It's inside the nucleus, right? So if the DNA is the brain, then if we took the nucleus and the DNA out of the cell, what should happen to the cell? What happens if somebody takes out your brain? You die, right? Well, what happens if somebody takes out the nucleus? Does the cell die? What they've actually shown through these studies in epigenetics is that when they take the nucleus out, the cell doesn't die. You know what happens to the cell? It can no longer replicate. So this nucleus isn't the brain of the cell. And this is important to listen. I'm not just trying to go into biology class for you. This is important for what I'm about to teach you. This nucleus isn't the brain of the cell. That nucleus is the reproductive system of the cell. Okay? The brain of the cell, what they found is actually the membrane, which makes sense. And here's why this makes sense. Because our brain comes from the same areas, the ectoderm comes from the same area as your skin. I'm talking about when the cells come together and everything's being created within the fetus. It comes from the same area as your skin and your gut and your eyes and your ears and everything else. And so your membrane of our body is our skin. It's our eyes. It's our ears. It's our availability to look at our environment, right? The mucosa in our mouth. And our body is constantly bringing in, there's receptors everywhere, right? We're constantly bringing in information. And it sends that information to the brain really quickly. And then the brain decides what we need to do. What needs to happen in the body? What needs to replicate differently so that we can adapt and survive? Does that make sense? So the actual brain is the membrane of the cell. If you get rid of the membrane, the cell falls apart and dies. So this membrane is doing the same thing. There's little receptors all over the membrane that tells the rest of the body, the rest of the cell, how to adapt to its environment. Do y'all follow me there? Which means that your environment actually decides what happens to your cells. Does that make sense? And here's what makes up your environment. Your thoughts make up your environment. How you see life. This is where we talk about like what you think about is what you get. Well, your thoughts actually do change you at a cellular level. The food that we're eating, chemicals can affect you at a cellular level. Stressors in general are going to affect you at a cellular level. And that's why this is the basis of chiropractic and natural medicine. Your thoughts, right? Toxins and traumatic experiences or traumatic things that happen in your life are going to decide how healthy these cells are. If you have too many of these and everything in your body is trying to adapt to survive, it's going to lead to a disease or what we call a disease process. I would call it, here's what I call it, I would call it adapting. Or even better, adaptive physiology. Does that make sense? So if we changed the name from disease to adaptive physiology, that would be a better way to look at it, because it's really just your body trying to survive in its environment. Here's a great example, and I can already see someone saying, but no. I have an autoimmune disease. I have rheumatoid arthritis, and that means your body is attacking itself, right? No, your body's not attacking yourself. Your body doesn't mess up. Here's what your body's doing. Your body's getting rid of bad cells, because what's your immune response supposed to do? It's supposed to get rid of sick cells, or cells that have been infested by maybe a virus or a bacteria or something like that. So its whole point is to create an immune response to it. Well, when you have too many chemicals in your environment, when you have maybe something like Epstein-Barr virus that's kind of affected your body, what will happen is those let's just say mercury. Mercury is a good example, or aluminum, like we have in all of our vaccines. That goes in and it'll absorb in places like your thyroid, because it's very absorbent. It can absorb in the brain. And your body your immune response will see those cells. It doesn't say thyroid cells anymore. You know what it sees? It sees unhealthy cells. And so it attacks it and gets rid of it. Thank God, right? It's not a bad thing. It's actually your body trying to respond in its environment. It's trying to heal itself. So it's not messing up. So same thing I just said is thoughts, toxins, and traumas. Your body's always trying to do the right thing. It's adaptive physiology. Even an autoimmune response is an adaptive physiology. We could say like, hey, what about genetic stuff? Well, for us, our second daughter has Down syndrome. That's a genetic disorder, right? So that's purely genetic, right? Maybe, but why is it more prevalent in women over 35? If it was purely genetic, age wouldn't matter, right? Or why can it happen more in some areas than others? So here's the thing, guys, is it's a mutation. It's an effect on the DNA right here, but that could happen at a birth, a creation of the fetus level. That could happen all the way back to the mom's eggs. And how else can they tell that it came more from the mom than from the father? Or from the father than the mom? Because it happens as a mutation all the way back from the beginning, from what that mom's whole life experience was. So the fact that something is purely genetic, purely hereditary, let's say, doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of how our body's made. We're made for healing. I don't care who you are, how you were born, what genetics you have, you were made for healing, to get back to balance, to get back to homeostasis, and to heal. And too many of these things right here, stressors, are going to keep you from getting there. Okay? Or they're going to be the things that make it harder for you to get there. So that everything we do in terms of healthcare in this model needs to be to help reduce as much negative thinking as possible, reduce as much toxic substances in our body and around our environment as possible, and reduce as much trauma to physical and stressors there, reduce those as much as possible, and then strengthen our body from the foods we're eating, from the thoughts we're having, to the movement that we do, moving all day long. Key to life is movement. To doing all those different things are what's going to help your body have the ability to handle these stressors. And guess what? That's all environment. Why can two people be in a toxic environment? Here's a great example. And I can't remember the name of the area where this happened, but when they had a bunch of asbestos issues, when they used to build a lot with asbestos and stuff, and there was people getting cancer from it and dying. Well, why didn't everybody get cancer from that asbestos that was working in those buildings? A lot of people did, but why didn't everybody get it? Because some people were handling that stress. Their body was getting rid of that toxin and handling the stress. Why is it that when the baby powder that they're talking, the talcum baby powder, has been shown to cause cancer, and there's all these lawsuits out against it? Well, why didn't everyone get cancer that used it? Same reason. Their body's getting rid of stress. Why can someone live to 110 years of age or 104 years of age and drink Diet Coke every single day? But then somebody else does everything, seemingly everything right. They eat good, they eat organic, they're at the health food store all the time, they're taking their supplements, they're exercising, and then at age of 50, they get cancer. Right, breast cancer. Well, it's one of these. Their body was not handling emotional stress properly, the emotional stress of life. And maybe it was toxins that got into their environment that their body wasn't working properly and getting rid of it. Okay, now does genetics play a role? Absolutely, it plays a role. But it is not the deciding factor, it's a role player. Okay, so this idea of the genetic theory is proven wrong. You're not a victim of your genes. So hopefully that's a hopeful message for you. And hopefully that's a hopeful message for you, right? That it's not genetics, it's your environment. You have some control over this. So my advice, guys, health-wise advice is going to be this. It's going to be look at the stressors in your life. Look at your thoughts. Are you a positive thinker, or you tend to move in towards that negative thinking way of going? If you're negative thinking, it's going to be bad. It's going to bring health issues. If you've had traumatic experiences in your life in terms of emotional experiences, like maybe you lost a child, maybe you went through a really bad divorce, then I'll tell you this, that you got to really work to help your body handle that stress. Go through counseling, going through ways of really releasing some of those things so you can get emotionally strong again, because otherwise it's going to be a constant emotional stress on you. If you've been through, you've been in a house full of mold, it's a great example. If you've lived around mold, well, then we need to make sure we're doing a proper detoxifying program to help get that stuff out of your body and strengthen your body back up, because it weakens the system. If you've had, a patient right now that has 2 parasites. It was just a stool test and found 2 parasites within his digestive system, and that's led to pretty much Graves' disease. He has extreme hyperthyroid symptoms. Also, his thyroid testing shows off the charts that he has that. And because that stressor of trying to handle this constant stress on his digestive system, along with everything else stress in his life, that stuff builds up, and now it starts to affect your immune response, creating an autoimmune response. Trauma. Have you had a car accident? Did you have a traumatic birth? One of my things I always ask patients is, any car accidents, injuries, falls, any of those things? No, not lately. I get not lately, but what about 20 years ago? What about when you were born? If you were a C-section baby, you've had a traumatic experience in your life. Honestly, if you've been born at all, you've had a traumatic experience in your life. Even babies born vaginally can have that, but it's for sure, if you're a C-section, if you've been vacuumed, pulled out, whatever, with the suction cup, if you've had that, you've had a traumatic experience in your life. And you need to have those evaluated and looked at, how can we reduce that trauma on your life? So think about this, like chiropractic care, amazing for those physical stresses. The number one thing you can do for physical trauma is get chiropractic care, make sure all your joints are moving properly and you have full range of motion in your body. Toxins, let's find out what it is, what it might be. Is it amalgam fillings? Is it too many vaccines? Is it molds? Is it beauty products, hairstylists? This is a big thing for you guys. It could be tons of beauty products. Thoughts. How do you see your life? What's your perception in life? Let's start to dive into that. And so guys, you take those things as a whole, and now you start reducing the way your body sees stress. Because here's the thing, like if I was to work out, so I worked out today, I'm expecting to get stronger from that. But if I kept working out all day long until my body just couldn't handle anymore, I'm probably actually gonna get weaker, right? Same thing with this stuff, is your body can handle a certain amount, and we want to strengthen it to handle a lot. And over time, it'll be able to handle more. However, we need to evaluate those to reduce the ones that aren't necessary. Is that cool? So that's that's the genetic theory. And obviously I didn't go into each little detail of it, but that's your genetic theory versus your epigenetics. And that's the germ theory. So genetic and germ theory are the basis of medicine. They're not the answer to your health. If you want that to be an answer to your health, stay in medicine, stay in the sick kind of care model that you're in. Or if you say, okay, look, I want to be healthy, I don't want those things anymore, come over to the life model. Let's just call it the life model, because this is all about bringing life. This isn't about giving medicines that take away from health. It's about giving your body and helping strengthen your environment. And here's how it works, guys, because a lot of people say, I know someone that did all the things right and everything else. Cool. Well, you do everything you can to test, to evaluate, to see where you're at, to bring good things into your life, to follow this kind of model over here. And then guess what you do with the rest of the stuff? You don't sit around and worry about it. You have faith in the rest. This is one of the number one reasons I don't actually like vaccines, not because of all the chemicals and everything else. It's because it's such an anxiety-filled, fear-filled concept that God messed up, and that we need to put something else in our body to protect us from the environment that was created to help us. Whereas mom said, what am I going to do if I don't vaccine? What am I going to do to protect my kids? Give them what they need, support their systems, do everything you can to help them be healthy. Right? Give them the things that their body wants, not things that their body doesn't want. And then not that their mind, their body, their health, right? What that wants. And then finally have faith in the rest. We can't control everything. There will be people that die of viruses and bacteria because they have a weak immune system.
There will be people that get cancer. There will be things that happen and everything else. And at the end of the day, there's a level of faith and health because medicine doesn't know it all. I don't know it all. No one knows it all. Have faith in God and the rest follows, right? Cool. That's my message for you guys. Hey guys, like this, love it, and share it. And ultimately, this is what everyone needs to know. They need to understand the difference between these two because this is the base of healthcare. If you want healthcare to change, you have to change the philosophy we're using, not pay for it with some other form like insurance. Cool? All right. See you guys later.